You know what's crazy about Hollywood? The people we see laughing together on our screens, the ones who make us believe they're best friends, sometimes can't stand each other behind the scenes. And Tim Allen? Well, he's got a reputation that might surprise you. The grunting tool-loving dad from Home Improvement, the hilarious Santa Claus we all loved, turns out he wasn't exactly spreading holiday cheer on set. In fact, one of his co-stars called working with him the absolute worst experience of her entire career. But here's the thing, she's not the only one. There's a pattern here, a trail of tension, broken relationships, and shocking stories that have been buried for years. So buckle up, because what you're about to discover about Tim Allen will completely change how you see him. Let's start with the bombshell that broke the internet. December 2023. Casey Wilson, the talented comedian you might know from Saturday Night Live, sat down for a podcast interview that would send shockwaves through Hollywood. She was a guest on the Bitch Sesh podcast, and what she revealed was absolutely stunning. Casey had appeared on the Santa Clauses, the Disney Plus sequel series to the beloved Santa Claus movies. It should have been a dream gig, right? Playing opposite one of Hollywood's biggest comedy stars in a family-friendly Christmas show. But according to Casey, it turned into an absolute nightmare that she'd been holding inside for months. Here's what happened. Casey played the adult version of Sarah, that little girl from the original Santa Claus movie. She had this scene where she wakes up thinking there's a burglar in her house, and she's supposed to throw things at Santa who's coming down her chimney. Simple enough, right? It's a comedy scene, the kind of thing actors do all the time. But apparently, Tim Allen had other ideas. Casey described the moment that everything went wrong. She's in the middle of the scene, giving it her all, throwing props at Tim Allen, and suddenly he stops. He walks right past her, completely ignoring her existence, and goes straight to the producer who's standing just 4 feet away. And get this, Casey can hear everything he's saying. Tim Allen complains to the producer that Casey is stepping on his lines. Now, here's the thing about comedy, it's collaborative. Actors overlap, they bounce off each other, that's how you create natural timing and chemistry. But Tim didn't want to work with Casey or communicate with her directly. Instead, he made the producer walk 1 foot over to Casey, with absolute horror on his face, to relay the message. Can you imagine how humiliating that must have felt? You're trying to do your job, you're excited to work with this comedy legend, and he won't even speak to you directly. He treats you like you're invisible, like you're not even worthy of basic professional courtesy. But wait, it gets worse. Much worse. Casey said that the entire time they were filming, Tim Allen never made eye contact with her. Not once. He never said a single word to her beyond what was required for the scene. She described it as so uncomfortable that everyone on set was walking on eggshells. The crew members looked frantic, like they were terrified of setting him off. Casey said she could feel the tension radiating through the entire studio. This wasn't just one bad day. This was the atmosphere Tim Allen created wherever he went. And then came the moment that really sealed the deal. When they finished filming the scene, Tim Allen didn't say thank you, didn't acknowledge anyone's hard work, didn't show even the smallest bit of gratitude. Instead, he shouted leaving, grabbed his Santa cape, picked it up, and literally dropped it on the floor like garbage, and walked out. The crew had to scramble to pick up his costume while his stand-in was hustled in to finish up. Casey said the stand-in was a lovely man who was much nicer to act against. That's when you know things are bad, when the stand-in is more professional than the actual star. But here's the kicker, the moment that really shows you what kind of environment Tim Allen creates. As Casey was standing there, still processing what just happened, someone from the crew, someone she didn't even know, walked past her and whispered, "You're seeing him on a good day." Let that sink in. On a good day, Tim Allen is so rude that he won't make eye contact with his co-stars, he complains about them instead of to them, and he throws his costume on the floor like a toddler having a tantrum. What's he like on a bad day? Casey Wilson used the strongest language she could. She called him a bitch. She said it was the truly single worst experience she'd ever had with a co-star in her entire career. And remember, Casey Wilson has worked in this industry for decades. She's been on Saturday Night Live, she's worked with hundreds of actors. For Tim Allen to rank as the absolute worst. That's saying something. Casey admitted she had buried this story for months because one of the show's producers was a great friend of hers, and because her children loved the Santa Claus movies. But eventually, the truth had to come out. She couldn't keep quiet anymore about how badly she'd been treated. Now, you might be thinking, okay, maybe Casey just caught him on a bad day, maybe there were circumstances we don't know about. But here's the problem. Casey Wilson isn't the only person who's spoken out about Tim Allen's behavior. Not even close. This pattern goes back decades, all the way to the height of his fame on Home Improvement. Let's talk about Patricia Richardson. For 8 seasons, Patricia played Jill Taylor, Tim Allen's wife on Home Improvement. They had incredible chemistry on screen. They made us believe they were a real married couple dealing with real problems. The show was a massive hit, one of the most successful sitcoms of the 90s. But behind the scenes, things were far from perfect. And the cracks really started to show when it came time to negotiate for a potential 9th season. Here's what happened. ABC offered Tim Allen a deal to continue the show. They offered him a substantial amount of money to keep the series going. Patricia Richardson, who was equally essential to the show's success, was offered significantly less. We're talking about a massive pay gap, the kind that makes your jaw drop. Patricia had carried that show just as much as Tim had. She was in every episode, she was beloved by fans, she was critically acclaimed. But when it came time to pay her what she deserved, ABC wasn't interested. Patricia made a bold move. She told ABC that she wanted equal pay to Tim Allen, or at least something close to it, plus an executive producer credit. She stood her ground. She knew her worth. And you know what happened? ABC chose to end the show rather than pay her fairly. They literally cancelled one of their biggest hits because they refused to close the gender pay gap. Patricia Richardson has been very open about this in recent years. She said that leaving the show was her way of giving a flip-off to Disney. She was mad, and rightfully so. But here's where Tim Allen comes into the picture. When Patricia was fighting for equal pay, where was Tim? Did he stand up for his co-star of 8 years? Did he use his leverage to help her get what she deserved? According to Patricia, no. She said that she was mad at Tim because he left her alone to be the only person saying no. He made her feel terrible, like she was the bad guy for wanting to be paid fairly. Patricia has admitted that she and Tim Allen don't keep in touch today. Despite working together for 8 years, despite creating one of television's most iconic couples, they don't talk. She's repeatedly praised his talent. She said she never stopped loving working with him, but the relationship is over. The way things ended left too many bad feelings. And it's not just about money. Patricia has also spoken about Tim's on-set behavior over the years. There's a clip that resurfaced from Home Improvement that's pretty shocking. In this blooper reel or behind-the-scenes footage, Tim Allen actually flashes Patricia Richardson on set. Yes, you heard that right. He exposes himself to his co-star, and it's caught on camera. People laughed it off at the time as a prank or a gag, but in today's environment, we recognize that behavior for what it really is, completely inappropriate and unprofessional. Which brings us to Pamela Anderson. Oh boy, this is a story that really opened people's eyes to Tim Allen's history. Pamela Anderson was in her early 20s when she joined Home Improvement as Lisa, the tool-time girl. She was young, she was excited to be working on a hit show, and it was literally her first day on set. According to Pamela's memoir, Love Pamela, which came out in 2023, Tim Allen greeted her in the most disturbing way possible. Pamela writes that she walked out of her dressing room on her very first day of filming, and Tim Allen was standing there in the hallway in his robe. She was 23 years old. He was 37. And according to Pamela, he opened his robe and flashed his penis at her. Just like that. Completely naked underneath. His excuse? He said it was only fair because he had seen her naked, referring to her Playboy photos. As if that makes it okay. As if seeing published photos of someone gives you permission to sexually expose yourself to them in a workplace. Let that scenario sink in for a moment. A 23-year-old woman, excited about her first real acting job, walks out of her dressing room, and one of the biggest stars on television, someone with all the power, decides to expose himself to her. What was she supposed to do? Complain and risk losing her job? Make a scene and get labeled as difficult? This was the 90s. The Me Too movement didn't exist yet. Women in Hollywood were expected to laugh off this kind of behavior or risk being blacklisted. Tim Allen denied the incident when the story came out. He said it never happened. But here's the interesting thing, Pamela Anderson had no reason to lie. She was writing her memoir, telling her story, and this was just one of many experiences she shared. She didn't sensationalize it. She didn't make it the centerpiece of her book. It was simply the truth about what happened to her. And honestly, given the pattern of behavior we're seeing with Casey Wilson, Patricia Richardson, and others, Pamela's story fits right in. But wait, there's more. Let's talk about Jonathan Taylor Thomas. JTT was America's heartthrob in the 90s. As the middle son Randy on Home Improvement, he was on teen magazine covers, He was the crush of millions of young fans, and he was a crucial part of the show's success. But in 1998, during the show's 8th season, Jonathan made the shocking decision to leave. He was written out of the show, with his character going to Costa Rica as an exchange student. At the time, Jonathan said he wanted to focus on his education. He wanted to go to college, travel, and have a normal teenage experience outside of Hollywood. It seemed like a mature, admirable decision. Tim Allen publicly said he understood and supported Jonathan's choice. But behind the scenes, things were apparently very different. Tim Allen later admitted that he was confused and a little upset about Jonathan's departure. Why? Because after Jonathan left the show to supposedly focus on school, he started taking other acting roles. He did films. He pursued directing opportunities. Tim Allen felt deceived. He told the press, "I was a little confused at why he didn't want to do this whole year. He said it was about going to school, but then he did some films. Did he want to do films? Did he want to go to school? It got mixed up in the translation. I mentioned publicly that I was confused. I don't think he liked that." So basically, Tim Allen publicly called out his teenage co-star for making career decisions that Tim didn't approve of. He questioned Jonathan's motives in the press, which is pretty unprofessional when you think about it. Patricia Richardson also weighed in on the situation. She said that Jonathan's departure was a sore point and that there were bad feelings all along. She even suggested that maybe Jonathan wasn't getting the best advice at the time. But you know what? Maybe Jonathan just wanted to get away from that environment. Maybe working with Tim Allen for 7 years was enough. Maybe he saw how Patricia was being treated with the pay gap. Maybe he witnessed inappropriate behavior. Maybe he just wanted to work with other people who would treat him with more respect. The fact that Jonathan Taylor Thomas didn't come back for the Home Improvement series finale speaks volumes. Most cast members return for final episodes. It's a chance to say goodbye to the show and the fans. But Jonathan didn't. And for years, he and Tim Allen didn't work together again. It wasn't until Last Man Standing, Tim's next sitcom, that they finally reunited. Tim has said that Jonathan came to shadow the director because he was interested in directing. But the damage was done. Their relationship during Home Improvement ended on such bad terms that it took over a decade to repair. So what's the common thread here? What do Casey Wilson, Patricia Richardson, Pamela Anderson, and Jonathan Taylor Thomas all have in common? They all had negative experiences working with Tim Allen. They all have stories of unprofessional behavior, rudeness, or worse. And these are just the people who've spoken publicly. How many others are out there who haven't shared their stories? How many crew members, guest stars, and day players have their own tales of working with Tim Allen? There's a culture in Hollywood where certain stars get away with bad behavior because they're successful. They bring in ratings, they sell tickets, they make the studios money. So everyone looks the other way. The crew learns to walk on eggshells. The producers make excuses. The co-stars suffer in silence. And the star continues to act however they want because there are no consequences. Tim Allen has had an incredibly successful career. Home Improvement ran for 8 seasons and was one of the top shows on television. The Santa Claus franchise has grossed hundreds of millions of dollars. Last Man Standing ran for 9 seasons. He's done voice work for Toy Story, one of the most beloved animated franchises of all time. He's made a fortune, he's achieved fame most actors can only dream of, and has been given opportunity after opportunity. But at what cost? How many people had to endure his rudeness? How many co-stars were made to feel small? How many young women were subjected to inappropriate behavior? How many crew members went home stressed and anxious because they had to work with someone who created such a toxic environment? Casey Wilson said everyone on the Santa Claus's set looked frantic and terrified. That's not normal. That's not how a professional set should operate. When the star of a show creates an atmosphere of fear and discomfort, it affects everyone. It affects the quality of the work. It affects people's mental health. It affects whether people even want to continue working in the industry. And here's the thing that really gets me. These are just the stories we know about. Pamela Anderson's incident happened in the 90s and we're only hearing about it now in 2023. Casey Wilson sat on her story for months before finally sharing it. Patricia Richardson has only recently opened up about the pay gap and her frustrations with how things ended. How many other stories are still out there, untold? How many people signed non-disclosure agreements? How many people are still afraid to speak out because Tim Allen is still powerful in Hollywood? The pattern is undeniable. From the early days of home improvement to as recently as 2023 with the Santa Clauses, Tim Allen has consistently been described as difficult, rude, and inappropriate. These aren't isolated incidents. This isn't a case of one person having a grudge. This is multiple people, across multiple decades, in multiple projects, all saying the same thing. And you know what makes it even more frustrating? Tim Allen's public image is the complete opposite. He's marketed as the everyman, the regular guy, the dad next door. His characters are lovable and relatable. Tim Taylor was clumsy but well-meaning. Scott Calvin/Santa Claus was grumpy but ultimately good-hearted. Mike Baxter on Last Man Standing was old-fashioned but caring. We're supposed to see Tim Allen as this wholesome figure, this family-friendly entertainer. But the reality behind the scenes tells a very different story. It makes you wonder about the other people we watch on TV and in movies. How many of them are putting on an act? How many lovable characters are played by people who are nightmares to work with? Hollywood is very good at maintaining images, at keeping secrets, at protecting their investments. But every once in a while, the truth comes out. And when it does, it changes everything. Think about how you feel about home improvement now. Can you watch reruns the same way? When you see Tim and Jill Taylor having a heartfelt moment, can you forget that Patricia Richardson was fighting for equal pay while Tim Allen left her hanging? When you see Randy Taylor being the smart, sensitive son, can you forget that Jonathan Taylor Thomas left on bad terms and didn't even come back for the finale? The magic is tarnished. The nostalgia is complicated. And the Santa Claus. Those movies are childhood classics for so many people. They're about believing in magic, about family, about the spirit of Christmas. But knowing that Casey Wilson had the worst experience of her career while making the sequel series, knowing that Tim Allen was so rude that even the crew was commenting on it, it casts a shadow over everything. The question becomes, what do we do with this information? Do we separate the art from the artist? Do we continue to support Tim Allen's projects even though we know how he treats people? Or do we hold him accountable? Do we demand better behavior from the people we give our time, attention, and money to? Hollywood is slowly changing. The Me Too movement has shown that powerful people can't get away with bad behavior forever. Social media has given regular people and lower-profile industry workers a platform to share their stories. Podcasts like the one Casey Wilson appeared on allow for unfiltered, honest conversations that wouldn't happen in traditional media. The old system of protecting difficult stars is cracking. People are speaking up, and audiences are listening. But there's still a long way to go. Tim Allen has never faced real consequences for his behavior. He's never been cancelled, never been fired from a project because of complaints, never had to publicly apologize or change his ways. The Santa Clauses got 2 seasons on Disney+. Last Man Standing had a successful 9-season run. He's still booking voice work. He's still making money. He's still being given opportunities. Meanwhile, the people he's hurt have to carry those experiences with them. Casey Wilson had to bury her story for months because she didn't want to upset a producer friend or disappoint her children. Pamela Anderson waited decades to tell her truth and was met with denial. Patricia Richardson fought for equal pay and was essentially pushed out of a show she helped make successful. Jonathan Taylor Thomas left the industry for years, and while he's given other reasons, you have to wonder if his experience with Tim Allen played a role. The real tragedy here is that this pattern of behavior has been allowed to continue for so long. If Tim Allen had been held accountable early on, if someone had said this behavior is unacceptable and actually enforced consequences, maybe things would be different. Maybe Casey Wilson wouldn't have had the worst experience of her career. Maybe Pamela Anderson wouldn't have been flashed on her first day of work. Maybe Patricia Richardson would have been paid fairly. Maybe Jonathan Taylor Thomas would have stayed on home improvement through the end. But that's not what happened. Instead, Tim Allen's success insulated him from accountability. His ratings and box office numbers were more important than how he treated people. And that's the real problem with Hollywood. It's not just about one difficult actor. It's about an entire system that values profit over people, that protects stars at the expense of everyone else, that allows toxic behavior to flourish as long as the money keeps rolling in. So yeah, Tim Allen never hated anyone more than these co-stars, and apparently the feeling was mutual. But it's bigger than just dislike or personality clashes. It's about power, about respect, about how we treat people when cameras aren't rolling. It's about creating safe, professional work environments where people aren't walking on eggshells or being subjected to inappropriate behavior. It's about recognizing that talent doesn't excuse cruelty, and success doesn't give you the right to treat people badly. The next time you see Tim Allen on your screen, remember these stories. Remember Casey Wilson saying it was the worst experience of her career. Remember Patricia Richardson fighting alone for equal pay. Remember Pamela Anderson being flashed on her first day. Remember Jonathan Taylor Thomas leaving and never looking back. Remember that the person you're watching isn't the character they play. They're a real person who makes real choices about how they treat others. And based on multiple accounts from multiple sources over multiple decades, Tim Allen's choices haven't been good ones.